Well, that's actually pretty simple, and it sounds a little silly, but it's really the Israeli people, because the people in Israel are very smart, they're very entrepreneurial, they're very competitive, they work very hard, and that makes for good semiconductor companies. And you know, frankly, Synopsys goes where the business is. There are semiconductor companies in Israel, they're growing, they're competitive, they're doing well on the world stage, and so we want to be here. They're buying tools, we go where people buy tools. So I think it's just the nature of the market in Israel. Israel is sort of the startup capital in the world now for semiconductor. It's a very driven culture. Semiconductor is a very tough business, and you have to be kind of tough, I think, to succeed at it, especially if you're starting a semiconductor company. You know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And we find that here. Frankly, we don't find that everywhere in the world. So we're pretty mercenary, to tell you the truth. We go where people want to buy our tools, and people want to buy our tools in Israel. So we're here, and we love it. Well, semiconductor is really in a critical phase right now. There's a tremendous amount of change in semiconductor right now. As the markets change, they change from sort of PC-oriented markets over to mobile computing-oriented markets. So power becomes very, very important because of that. And also we're seeing the need to move from a planar transistor to a FinFET or vertical transistor to control power. So all of this means tremendous change all across the design flow. So at Synopsys, we're really, more than ever, working at the fundamental level all across the flow. In other words, it wouldn't be enough if we put all of our energy into synthesis or into place and route or extraction or TCAD in order to enable people to make, you know, the best possible chips at 14 nanometers using FinFET technology. We need to start with TCAD, which is the atomic modeling of the process, move up to lithography, where we're the leader, move up to circuit simulation, where our HSPICE tool is the gold standard, move up to extraction, and put more energy into all of these things. Move up to place and route, where our tools are the reference tools for the foundries in routing rules, move to exploration. So we're seeing, I think we're seeing a bigger change in the EDA market and the requirements from customers than ever before. And I think that's simply because our customer base, the semiconductor companies, really do have to accelerate their innovation right now. They're not selling to the same customers that they were selling to before, and they're not selling the same chip that they were selling before. They're not selling the next graphics chip or the next base station chip and things like that. Suddenly, their customers are wanting something new. And if they don't capture that socket, if they don't innovate fast enough, someone else will step in and do it. So they're asking us for change throughout the whole flow, and we're putting more energy into that now than we ever have in the 17 that I've seen in the 17 years that or 18 years I've been at Synopsys. So FinFETs are quite fundamental. FinFETs are the first fundamental change in the transistor structure in the 30 years that I've been in the industry. Early in my career, I was designing with bipolar circuits, and there were many types. There was TTL, there was ECL, and there were some, there was early CMOS, metal gate CMOS, and things like that, and there was NMOS, and a whole bunch of different transistor structures out of which you would make logic. But very quickly, in the early 80s, we all switched over to CMOS, and everything was done in CMOS, complementary metal oxide silicon. And since then, we've just been making the CMOS, the planar CMOS transistor, smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller from 1982 or something like that, all the way until now. But now we've reached the 20 nanometer generation, and the transistor is so small that you could say it doesn't work anymore. It's impossible to turn off because you're essentially turning off the transistor lays on the surface of the wafer. You're turning it off from one side, so you can't create enough voltage from one side to completely deplete the region. Is the simplest way to look at it. So there's been a lot of research done over the last 10 years. What do we do about this? And Intel led the way at this 22 nanometer generation to figure out how to make a transistor that doesn't lay down on the wafer. It sits up with a little fin, or actually several little fins. So you can wrap the gate around it, squeeze off essentially deplete the region from both sides and completely turn it off. So we were at a place where transistors were very leaky. They're sort of like a leaky hose in your house. You turn it off, but it's still running. That's why, the battery life, that's why batteries don't last as long as you would like them to and things like that. Now, we can turn it off with FinFETs. We can turn it off much, much more completely. What that does for the consumer is it means that things like PCs, things like phones are going to last much longer in their standby state. I think that Apple just introduced a new version of the MacBook Air, which uses a FinFET chip from Intel, and people are shocked by the battery life. It's 13 hours of battery life or something like that. And of course, we want our devices to run much, much longer on battery. Now, I think there's another thing. The other thing we want from our devices is we want a lot more performance. Now, we're about to see people hook game controllers up to mobile phones. And once you have a game controller, you're going to want the game to operate like the console game that you have. In other words, there's going to be things like that will drive a lot more desire for performance. Performance takes a lot of power. And so all things being equal, battery life would really suffer. But with FinFET technology, you can up the performance tremendously and still keep a lid on the power. So I think FinFETs will enable users to get more of the experience that they're looking for out of their mobile devices. That'll be great for the that'll be great for the electronics industry because more people will buy them. That'll be great for the semiconductor industry because they'll sell more chips to the people who are, the companies that are making these things for people. And that'll be great for us because, it's more design, more electronics. Anything that's good for electronics is good for semiconductor, is good for EDA. And without the invention of FinFET, which Intel has really led, we would be at a stopping point in the evolution of electronics. With the invention of FinFET, we've got, at least another 10 years before we have to now invent something else new, which I'm personally pretty confident that the industry will. It always has. We were in a phase when device sales themselves were driving tremendous growth. In other words, everyone in Israel probably went from owning a cell phone to owning a smartphone. And so the number of devices exploded, tremendous growth in that market. That growth, I think, is probably going to begin to slow down because we all own smartphones, and now it's at least in the first world here, it's becoming more and more of a replacement market. Now we need to sell smartphones and smartphone technology to the slightly less advantaged people in the world, and there are a tremendous number of people. So I think there is the industry has an opportunity for a very good smartphone experience, very good mobile computing experience at a lower price point. And I think we'll see that will grow a tremendous amount of growth. The other area that we're seeing tremendous growth in right now is in the electronics for the data centers. All of this mobile, all these devices we carry around are all connected to the cloud, as we're calling it now. They generate a ton of data. We're serving a lot of video. We're Facebooking and things like that. In order to handle all that data, companies are building huge data centers all over the world. And so the business of networking, the business of servers, infrastructure for these data centers is really exploding right now. Another area that's doing very, very well are more, I would say, industrial areas like automotive. Cars are becoming electronic platforms now, much more than mechanical platforms. I think GM is hiring an additional 10,000 software engineers to write software for the car. So there's plenty going on there. And what we're all looking forward to, or what we all see coming, is what's generally called the Internet of Things. We're going to go from, right now we're at the point where there are just about as many mobile devices as there are people on the planet. By 2017, it's predicted there'll be 1.5 to 2 times as many mobile devices as there will people on the planet. Well, how will that be? We're not all going to carry 2 cell phones and things like that. We're going to move to a point where everything will be intelligent. The coffee pot will be intelligent. The toaster will be intelligent. The refrigerator will be intelligent. The thermostat will be intelligent. It'll all be interconnected. You can run your whole life essentially from your smartphone. So the Internet of Things will come, and that will be the next level of explosive growth. So I don't think there's any, I wouldn't worry too much that the world's going to stop wanting semiconductors. The desire for more and more intelligence in the devices that we use is going to continue and is going to fuel more and more and more growth, just like it has for the last 30 years. We are a fundamental enabler. We're a tool builder. So we don't make cell phones. We don't make semiconductors. We sell tools to the engineers that make semiconductors, and we're a critical part of that chain. So you could say the real critical suppliers, the critical tools are the foundries, companies like TSMC and Samsung, who actually build the chips, and those are giant $10 billion facilities that people go to actually manufacture the silicon. Then there are the key IP providers, companies like ARM. We're the second largest IP provider, who provide the key circuits. It's called intellectual property, say the USB core or the PCI core or things like that. And then there are the tools that engineers actually use to build these things. A modern chip might have 2, 3, 4, even now you're starting to see 10 billion transistor chips. So obviously no one's going to draw 10 billion transistors on a chip by hand. That's all done via software. So really what engineers do for a living is they drive the tools. They tell the tools what they want them to do in building the transistors, and we build those tools that the engineers use. So in essence, the partnership between Synopsys and the semiconductor design community has to be and is extremely close, because the engineers, they really run our tools for a living. And we're together discovering the next level of, discovering or inventing the next process technology, or rather our customers are inventing the next process technology, but they need us right there with them to develop that software so they can use that process technology. So the amount of collaboration and the closeness of partnership is really extreme. And that's why you see an event today. We're at the Synopsys user group meeting here in Herzliya, where we got 500 or 600 Israeli semiconductor engineers coming to hear what are our tools doing now, interact with the Synopsys R&D teams, what do they need in the future, and that's on top of constant interactions between our local support staff in Israel, our local R&D staff in Israel, and R&D people from all over the world who constantly come and visit. So I think we're a critical part of the whole chain that leads to the devices that's changing the way the world works. Well, startups are under a lot of pressure. It's tough to be a semiconductor startup in the world. You have to be tough to do it. I think that's why they tend to be done in Israel now. But one thing that semiconductor startups can't afford to do is fail. Chips cost a lot of money and they take a lot of time to do. And if you design a chip and it doesn't work or it doesn't perform adequately, you risk losing the interest of your investors, who are going to go look for some easier way to make money, in some other field that that looks more attractive. So what we offer is, I think, a degree of collaboration and sort of risk management to make sure that when a semiconductor startup launches a chip project, we've got local people dedicated to their success to make sure that when they, make sure they go down the road correctly, make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make them successful, make sure that they are successful, so that if they're in the right market, if they've chosen the right product to make, that the barrier to success should not be successfully implementing that chip. If we're working together, hopefully they wouldn't find that the disaster for a startup would be they've decided what market to enter, they've got the right customer relationships, they've targeted the right product, and they just can't get the chip done. that's a sort of a tragedy. Now, we can't really help them select the market. You know, we don't have their customer relationships and things like that, but we can do a lot to help them make sure that the chip they're building actually works, you know, that the building they're building doesn't fall down, to use an analogy. And that's, I think, the number one thing we can do to help with their success, and we're pretty dedicated to that.